This is Ric McCord, and we want everyone to give me back my pro wrestling. It was great, and I miss it.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, this is Jimmy from the Live and in Color with Wolfie D and Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. Would you like to also make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. And that's how you're hearing this right now. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, it's made the job of producing multiple podcasts so much easier. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
This is Steve Bowtie Bryant here. Back in the 90s, I was a pro wrestling photographer for the South, and I released what might have been one of the original sets of indie trading cards. I ran across some of these original sets. They were up in Randall Fanning's attic all this time. PG-13 rookie card, Ricky Morton, George Weingroff as the Sheik, Chris Champion, Reno Riggins, Billy Montana, Gary Valiant, the Scorpion, the Medic, Rick Reynolds, Jeff Daniels, Mephisto and Dante, Ben Jordan, Steve Neely, Marcus Woodrow, Clinton Charisma, Little Farmer John. If you'd like an opportunity to get these cards, contact me now. You can get them for only $49.99. Contact me at stevebowtiebryant at iCloud.com. Get your set now while supplies last.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And here I am, as always, with my brother from the same father and mother, the Plastic Sheik, Jared Street. What's up, Jut? How you doing?
I'm good, brother. How about yourself?
I am good, man. Just, doing this thing as I always am, podcast. But everything's good.
Just knock them out constantly. You and Wolfie been doing some good ones lately.
Yeah, we've had some good interviews. We just did our top 10 oh my god moments. That was kind of fun. And then we interviewed Boris Zukov, the Russian. Nice. Yeah, and then we just interviewed Bob Cook today, and Bob's been a long time underneath guy for the WCW Championship Wrestling from Florida. Mm-hmm. He had a cool run, so good interviews. Very happy with all of them. So I'm excited for those to come out, but I'm most excited about this one today, man. We got Ric McCord, man. I'm stoked.
Yeah, man, it should be a great one. I'm real excited. That picture you sent me the other day with Steamboat, Piper, Flair, and him all in kind of one, like hanging back watching the matches go on or something like that, man. That was that's a trip. Oh, Jay Youngblood was on it too. Sorry.
Yeah, it kind of lets you know where he is coming from, where he's worked. I mean, it's a cool photo, and it's like, who are all these guys in this photo? And then you kind of figure it out, and there's some legendary dudes in there, and then Rick standing right there with them. So it kind of lets you know where he was and where he's what he's all about.
Yeah, so, where he's been. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited to get him on, but of course I want to do a little company business here. First off, we got to thank Tommy Angel. He's climbing the charts quickly, got some great responses from all the people that listened to that episode. I think he's going to be concerning Gators #1 spot in a little bit for sure.
Yeah, man.
Doing some great numbers with that one. Thank you all so much. If you haven't, for some reason, listened to that episode and you're listening to this one, definitely go back and listen to that one. It was a lot of fun. And man, he's just really put us over too as far as everything. And he really enjoyed his time on here. So hopefully that means more people. I think hopefully David Isley will be coming soon. I'm excited about that. And man, we've got a lot of other people lined up that, like I said, it's just humbling and excited at the same time,
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's good that us being from this little neck of the woods can get to anybody that has been anywhere to talk to us, man. It's we've been lifelong fans, but sometimes that doesn't mean anything. So
right, definitely a blessing. We're just some small town kids that get a chance to talk some pro wrestlers and having fun with it. One of the things we just did, and I got to thank you for this, Sheik. We just went to Johnson City, Tennessee on November 11th. It was a Saturday, and we watched us some wrestling, some WWE Super Show, and man, I had a good time. What about you?
Yeah, man, I did. The kids had a good time too,
Yeah, that was the most important part,
Yeah, they loved it. It was, we had good seats. We were right there at the ring. I felt like we could see everything good, and made a little bit of scrunched up, but luckily I could put little Sheik on my lap a little bit. He could. Yeah,
and Paisley was sitting beside me and gave me half her seat too. So I hope I know Sheik's a fan, but I hope Paisley came out a fan too. So
I think it probably increased her fandom of it a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's all time playing with little Sheik when he wants her to play. He's like, come on, play wrestlers with me. So she gets forced into it sometimes. So
yeah, so I'm sure she's doing good at that. But yeah, they seem to have had fun, and it was cool seeing it through their eyes. You know what I mean? And I don't think little Sheik. I mean, I bet his cheeks were hurting after that because he didn't stop smiling the whole time. So
yeah.
There was a time when Becky Lynch came out, and it was, I said, "Hey Pax, let's go over there and see her." And I tried to, and he was like, "No!" He was so shy. Yeah.
That was like our one opportunity to get any closer like that. But we might have to get him those seats next time where he doesn't have to work for it. He'll just have to.
Yeah, those Superstar Experiences people were sitting right beside us, so that kind of tells everybody what kind of seats we had. But 3 rows back and 4 seats over from the entryway, so it was very cool, man. Yeah. Had a lot of fun. I enjoyed
it though. I had a good time with you and the kids, and
yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to try to do it again sometime.
Yeah, man. Well, I told everybody I'd like to see some old wrestling, but unfortunately we don't have that anymore, so we have to watch what's given to us. So it was definitely a lot of fun, and I think they had a great experience. And I tell you, man, I remember some about the wrestling, but I didn't remember how intimate the Freedom Hall was. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
To me, it's like we really got the chance to. I don't think there's a bad seat in that house, So
yeah, no, I think you could have seen it pretty good from anywhere in there. It could be maybe some side angles you couldn't see it as good from, but
right.
Most of the angles I think you can see it pretty good from. So
yeah, and we saw people like Cody Rhodes, The Miz, LA Knight, Becky Lynch, of course, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, both Usos. Yeah, it was. I mean, again, I don't follow it that closely, but it was just a lot of fun just to see that. And again, I was asking Paxton, I was like, who are we yelling for in this match? And
we saw the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion now. So.
Yeah, and we got to see Little Nate. I popped about that.
We were probably more popped about that than anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gunther's chops sounded like they hurt, though.
Yeah, there was no way you couldn't hear that in I bet they heard that in Kingsport,
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate you, bringing me there and watching that. That was a lot of fun. It was a very fun experience. Got to spend some time and watch some wrestling,
Yeah,
so
we're glad you could make it, because it was
yeah.
You never know. It was like kind of a, had a couple weeks notice to you, but you never can tell sometimes.
Spur of the moment, but hey, it was worth it. Absolutely. But yeah, man, I guess with all that being said there, I think we should go ahead and get our guest on the show. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Let's get him on here.
All right. We'll be right back with Ric McCord after these messages.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis. We're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
Join me, Gene Jackson, for the Jackson Interaction Podcast, where I'll be doing one-on-one interviews with people from the world of professional wrestling, as well as stand-up comedy. You can get them anywhere podcasts are available in both video and audio form, but you can find them all at GeneJacksonPod.com.
All right, we are back with our very special guest today. And honestly, Jared, once again, we're getting some great guests, man. And I want to go ahead and introduce him right now. He is the legendary Ric McCord. Ric, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm enjoying it.
Awesome.
Great to have you, man.
Yeah, we'll have some fun. I tell you, all we like to do is just tell good stories and talk about your days in the wrestling business. So this will be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, one thing, we always start a show with is the Plastic Sheik. We always start with his favorite question. Sheik, take it away.
All right, Ric. So what this question is designed to do is it's just going to tell the people who, like, your influences in wrestling, who your favorites were, anything like that, or just somebody you just all around liked. But like, if you had a top 4 or top 5 favorite people in the wrestling business, a Mount Rushmore, so to say, of wrestling, who would that be?
Well, for one, main one would be Randy Savage. I learned so much from him and from Lanny, his brother.
Yeah.
It was I was part of the beginning of ICW, and also was voted Rookie of the Year. So that was a great honor that I appreciated. Awesome. And then, of course, just there's a bunch of them. Wahoo McDaniel, I got to tag with him one time, and that was a major honor.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My dream was to wrestle for Mid-Atlantic, but I went to several places, other territories, and gained all the experience that I could, so I would look much better in front of the home crowd. So that's what I did.
There you go.
And then with Mid-Atlantic, I got to wrestle in the home Civic Center in the Greensboro Coliseum, where I always like to go. And so then I've made major friends from just that era alone. Actually, after I retired, I got into the transportation business, and I now have a limo service here in Roanoke. And I got to surprise Ricky Steamboat. I saw his name come up on the schedule for a trip to the airport. And so he comes walking out from the lobby and sees me standing there by the car, and he was shocked. It was quite good, but I always had the most respect for him. He's one of the nicest people that's in the whole business, I would say.
Yeah.
And and it's been different ones like that. I spent a lot of time in Central States, and Bob Geigel was a great promoter to work for. So I had the opportunity to meet and work with and even tag with some of the best in the business. It was a great ride.
Wow. Great list, man. It's Ricky Steamboat. Yeah. Ricky Steamboat is somebody that I think people remember him when they talk about Randy Savage in the match at WrestleMania 3, or they remember him with the Flair matches he had. But man, he was a worker and a half, man. I mean, that's
yes.
So
I tried to do his arm drag, but he had a protected. It was a little bit hard to do.
Hey, we don't blame you for not being able to do that one. It's okay. That's incredible. Yeah. You know, there's a famous photo of you, and it's got Steamboat, Youngblood. I think it's Barry Horowitz, Roddy Piper, and Ric Flair in the photo. And that's like the Mount Rushmore right there, you know? So that's a pretty crazy picture. Do you remember taking that photo? I guess it was taken of you, I would assume. Yeah.
I do. I think it's the one that I've seen come up several times. It was at a high school gym. Yeah. And we were standing along the wall, just watching the matches and waiting for our turn to come up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the picture. I've seen it several times.
Yeah, it's a great photo. And was it Barry Horowitz or Brad Armstrong? I can never tell. I'm always
Barry Horowitz.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Anyway, incredible picture. And it's just like, you know, and one thing, Rick, is funny is I didn't realize Piper was as tall as he was, because, you know, you had all the guys that are pretty much the same height, you know, and Rick sitting down. But, you know, it was funny because Piper just looked crazily tall there. It was like, wow, you know, but I mean, Barry Horowitz was pretty tall guy too, I thought. So anyway,
he was just a little bit taller than me.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's just crazy to think that you've got all that encompassed in one photo and you're standing right there with him. So thank you for being our guest today on the show. This is awesome. Very honored.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Well, Rick, we talked about other guys now, but I want to talk about Ric McCord now. So, Rick, my very first question of every show is let's talk about your younger days. Where'd you go to high school? Where were you born? What sports did you play?
Okay. Well, I was born in Salem, Virginia, and after all the wrestling and everything, that's where I settled back at. Yeah. I actually live in the house I grew up in.
Wow.
So I toured the country and then come back home.
Yeah.
But anyway, I met a guy named Mike Weddle who wrestled as Eclipso.
Yes, sir.
And he had a ring in his backyard up in Salem, and I met him at the matches, Starland Arena. That was where the first match I ever went to was. And so he had built this ring with railroad ties planted in the ground. Oh. So it was a solid, stiff ring.
Yes, sir.
And you know, and we every Saturday we started doing matches. You know, through the week we'd watch and work on moves, and then we'd have matches, and then we started running some spot shows with somebody that had a portable ring.
Yeah.
And after doing that a little while, I said, I want to do this for real. Yeah. And I went to Jay Youngblood told me, because I used to talk to him at the matches long before I ever worked for Crockett, and he told me Tennessee was the best place to get your break. And so that's what I did. I went out there and I did the tryout match on TV, and they told me to come back.
Yeah.
So that's when it started. That was in '78.
Wow. So that was, I don't want to make you sound, but that was actually the year I was born, Rick. That's wild. Yeah. so no disrespect, please.
None at all.
So did you train with Mike? Was Mike ahead of you in the business, or did y'all learn together, or how did that work?
We we go to the matches on Saturday night, and then Sunday we'd come back and we would get out in the ring and we would have our own matches.
Okay.
And we actually even started drawing a crowd on a Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, so I just said I want to do it for real and try to make a living at it. And he was a little behind. I mean, he never really toured. He went some places because we didn't keep in tight contact. But
sure.
But he never really actually got into the business of that's all he did. You know, I went to where I was doing 7 days a week and all over the place.
You were, and I can't wait to talk about all of it. But to go back to Clip a little bit here, Clip actually trained my mentor and trainer and the guy that got me in the business, Kenny Steele, and Kenny Pack. And Kenny just passed away a couple years back, unfortunately. Yeah. But anyway, I know that Clip and him had kind of fallen out and then got back together and fallen out. And then there, it's kind of like, I think they had a deep kinship for one another, but I feel like also, it's like like a rebellious child. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I think Kenny wanted to strike out on his own. And I don't know, you know, everybody wants to be their own promoter until it's time to be the promoter. You know what I mean? So
it's a hard job.
It is a hard job. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess technically you learned with yourself and such as that. So go ahead, Jared, ask the question.
So you talked about like having like a, you know, kind of like a tryout match, but what would you consider your like first official match? And like, was it for like what promotion or whatever would it be for?
It was for Nick Gulas in Nashville.
Okay.
And I had, being in the minor league, when I'd go to the matches at Starland or to the Greensboro Coliseum, I made friends with Jay Youngblood and different ones like that. And they used to coach me and tell me, you know, what I needed to do and the best place to go for a tryout to actually get in. And that's why I went to Nashville, because that's what Jay had told me.
Cool.
So, you know, so they you know, they didn't try to kayfabe around me. They just they were open and great, and it was several of them. But Jay Youngblood was one of the main ones that I talked to every time I went to the matches.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I bet, you know, what a loss that guy was, right? He could have been, you know, one of the all-time greats, and just tragic loss there. So NWA Mid-America for the Gulas family, or Nick Gulas, as I say, you know, this is going to kind of lead us into our very first section of the name game. But a lot of our listener base is from Nashville. That's kind of our bread and butter people, you know. Okay. So when it comes down to it, you know, Nick Gulas is so legendary there. Talk about Nick himself. I would love to hear some stories about Nick.
He was very interesting, and I always have repeated. I even told someone a few weeks ago about the conversation Nick I had.
Yeah.
When I was working there, they let me work in the office and run errands for them. Mm-hmm. And you know, that was ideal for me, because I'm right in the middle of, you know, some of the best to, you know, listen to and learn from. And so one time, you know, Nick was always had the reputation of not paying good. You know, some promoters had that. But anyway, he, you know, I said something about a raise, and he said, a raise? He says, it's not what you make, it's what you save. And I said, but Nick, how can I save anything if I'm not making any money? And everybody in the room just cracked up.
That's incredible. It's so true, though. It's like, how can you save $1 if you're only making $1, you know? So it's like, wow.
But my education was the value in being there. That was
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Being in the office, I got to see a lot of the behind the scenes, you know, that, you know, getting guys in there and, you know, promoting different things. So, you know, it was a plus.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, you know, like I said, we normally do the name game during the ending part of our show, but with you, we feel like it would be better if we kind of do it as we go. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to start the very first portion of the show with the name game. So, Ric McCord, would you like to play the name game?
Sure.
All right. DJ, hit the music.
Now it's time to play the name game. Now it's time to play the name game. Now it's time to play the name game.
All right, we are back with Ric McCord and the name game. And Rick, the very first name, we've already talked about Nick. We got to talk about George.
Oh, I saw George a couple of weeks ago in Columbia, Tennessee. I went to a reunion there.
Yeah.
And he's working in the, I think it's like the security of, you know, like the jail or prison or something.
Yeah.
But, he was always interesting to listen to, and he was still full of stories.
Yeah.
And, it was during the era of him, you know, wrestling, you know, a lot of people thought he was the promoter's son and got everything, but George is a good guy.
Yeah.
You know, we got along, never had any problems.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about being the promoter's son is even if you're a good wrestler, people are going to look like that it's given to you. You know what I mean? And but so we're trying to also get George on a show. So maybe Rick, after you have a good time with us, just let George know that we don't bite. Okay. So, well, the next name, Jared, take him away.
This is former guest of the show, Arvel Hutto.
Arvel Hutto. He was at the reunion I just went to.
We love him.
He's even the one I keep in touch with, when I confirmed that I would be there.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He's, I worked with him a couple of times. Most of the time, he was in a tag match in the main events some of the times, and but always great to talk to. I have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, Arvel's a great guy. We're big fans of Dante and Mephisto, and we like Arvel quite a bit. He's too modest, though. He's too modest. He won't own up to doing nothing. He's like, well, I just wish I did more, and it's like, Arvel, you did some pretty great stuff, brother. It's okay.
Yeah. I drove that trip, and then I went to a limo convention in Orlando, so it was like 3,300 miles for the whole trip. But
holy cow.
I didn't want to miss the reunion in Columbia because, that's my start. That's the first people I knew.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
And God forbid, you never know with as we grow older. And again, I know you're a spring chicken, Rick, but some of the guys, you never know if you're going to see them next time. So it's you want to make it when you can, So, speaking of somebody that I wish I could see tomorrow, this one would be beautiful Bobby Eaton.
Yeah. Bobby was one of the nicest people. It was hard for him to be a heel. He was so nice. He would, I don't want to, I'm not one on the expose side, but he'd give you a clothesline, and as you were going down, he would say, "You okay? You okay?" And he wouldn't hurt anybody for anything. And just super, super nice guy.
Yeah, Bobby was great for sure.
Yeah.
Jared?
How about Terry Gordy?
I met Terry, I think that was down when I worked for Bill Watts. And he was a nice guy. I didn't get to talk to him a whole lot because he was kind of in his clique.
Gotcha.
But I worked a couple of matches with him and Michael Hayes.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was cool.
Yeah. So I was doing my research on you, and I was looking up your match history, and it actually showed this big match that you worked in for the Gulases, and it was all these great names in it, and Terry popped up. So maybe we skipped ahead too much there, but I'm not sure if he was actually in that match or not. So I apologize if we got him too quickly there. But the next one is the Nightmare Danny Davis.
I was there when Danny was. He was already main event, and it was him and Ken Wayne. And the Tennessee people are just automatically welcoming, and that everyone that I've met was like that. All the boys, it was great, and everybody wanted to help you and coach you a little bit if you needed it. So it was a great way that I started in the business, and I wasn't under the pressure of a gigantic promotion that my inexperience would have come out. But I'm glad I got to start in Tennessee, and it was the best place.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. Very cool. Great guys.
You mentioned it before but Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. I owe a lot of respect and everything to Randy because he gave me a good break. He just the matches we had, it was an education every time, and I'm fortunate that I got to work with him like I did, and they put the Rookie of the Year title on me. So that helped me get a lot of the main event matches with Randy out in the spot shows.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So, and he was great to work with. All you had to do is, he didn't like an arrogant person.
Yeah.
And he would put them in their place when he had to, and he could do it.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
So I got a follow up for you. I always like to ask everybody that kind of knew Randy, like, was he always in that character? Like always in his like macho man character?
He was. He wasn't as loud vocal. You know, he had a softer voice that, you know, when he'd talk to you, but he would come into character just in a split of a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. What a tense gentleman, but also he cared a lot about the business, I think. And that was one thing
definitely.
Yeah.
So and he didn't like a cocky worker. He liked somebody that appreciated the business and appreciated, the boys working with them and everything.
Yeah.
And if you were arrogant, he would put you in your place.
Yeah. Well,
and he could do it.
I believe it. I believe every bit of it. Now, I believe you kind of wind up leaving Mid-America, and you work with these two gentlemen, and these two gentlemen actually became quite famous a few years later after this for partially an expose on the business and also a slap to a John Stossel, but Dr. D and Eddie Mansfield. I think you worked in a tag match with them, and I'm not sure about the promotion, but do you remember working with them?
Yeah, I do. It was either right at the end of working for Nick Gulas or after I left ICW. I was up there for 2 years. Then I came back home. My stepfather was sick, and I wanted to help my mom for a little bit.
Okay.
And he passed away. And just as soon as that happened, I got booked in Memphis.
Gotcha.
And I think that's where our paths crossed.
Okay, gotcha. What did you think about that whole deal? I mean, do you feel like Dr. D did the right thing there, or do you think it was all a work, or what do you think?
I don't really know what to say on that one. It was, I respected the business, and when somebody is not respecting the business or the other workers, that's where you get your weak links. And there were some that they rose them to stardom beyond wrestling, and I think that's what they were trying for.
Well, hey, Dr. D, I don't think he pulled that punch or that slap. Let's just say that. So he looked like he connected a couple times. And then I know Eddie, we've had several guests on the show that have really put over Eddie Mansfield. So again, I'm not trying to make you say anything you don't want to say. I'm just saying that some people seem to have liked Eddie and some people didn't like him because he did that, so.
Yeah. Well, I liked him. We had a good rapport back in the dressing room, and worked with him a couple of times. So, I got along with everybody.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't dwell on any imperfections because I wasn't perfect.
Understand. Hey, that's a very realistic way to look at it. So, and I know that one thing, and I'll always say this, was Dr. D was the original Stone Cold too. So that's my opinion.
Okay.
He seemed like he had the Stone Cold Steve Austin character before Steve Austin did. But but anyway, let's talk more about Ric McCord. How about that? So, when you go to ICW, now ICW for the Poffos, to me, that's one of my favorite after, learning more about the business. That's one of my favorite promotions to watch. And one of the two reasons, obviously for Randy Savage and the Poffos, but there are two other guys that I really enjoyed in ICW, and we'll talk about them in just a second. But leaving NWA Mid-America and going to ICW for the Poffos, was Randy your connection on that, or Lanny?
I'm trying to remember. It wasn't, they were working for Nick Gulas while I was there. And when they decided to start it, they asked me if I wanted to come along with them.
Okay.
And, new in the business, I was a little bit scared to, if you became somebody that would jump ship, it would be a reputation to have. And
sure.
But, none of that happened that way. It was time for me to go and grow some more.
See some new towns and
yeah. And so they gave me the opportunity, and I moved to Lexington, Kentucky, where they were based.
Gotcha. Yeah. Did you live in all those apartments with all them? Is that where you were staying?
No, I actually knew someone up there, and she moved to Florida, and she let me stay in her house.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Right off New Circle Road.
Well, so my brother and I, we're from a small town in southwestern Virginia, Lebanon, Virginia. And it turns out ICW ran in Lebanon, Virginia quite a bit because of this guy right here, Hoot Gibson. Do you have any good Hoot stories?
Not that I can remember, just super nice guy, and he was a hoot.
I love that. We're actually trying to get him on the show. I know he's not doing well. We've talked to Ronnie Garvin before, and he's actually was telling us that he had Parkinson's and was not doing well. So hope Hoot's doing okay. And, even if we don't get him on the show, hope he lives as long and as healthy as he can. That's what we like. So, and he was our claim to fame in Lebanon. You know what I mean? Everybody knew Hoot, and everybody knew he was a wrestler, and he protected the business just as well as anybody could. So he was,
I think I remember him back when I was doing the beginning with Eclipso. When we started running a couple of
Very
shows.
Cool. Okay, gotcha.
So I remember way back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool.
How about Doug Vines?
Doug Vines, great worker. He was my opponent for Rookie of the Year, ICW Rookie of the Year. And when it got down to the voting, then I beat him for it, and that set it up for us. We had a running feud the whole year.
Yeah.
Nice. And great worker. Great. Yeah. I mean, he could get some heat, and he made me look good too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm trying to get Doug on a show. I know we're having a little bit of trouble tracking him down, but if anybody out there listening has contact info for Doug Vines, let me know. We'd love to have him on the podcast too. So
I haven't heard where he might be.
Yeah, I think he's up in Somerset, but we can't get a phone number on him, but we'll figure it out. The next two on the list, I'm going to put them together since they're father and son. We've talked about Randy. Now we're going to talk about Lanny and Angelo.
Mm-hmm. Most of my beginning matches in ICW was with Angelo.
Okay.
And it was kind of a routine match, so you knew what was kind of what to expect out of it, and it was an education every time. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with him, and Lanny. We tag teamed quite a bit in ICW.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
He always had the best stories to tell. He was an entertainer in the dressing room too.
Yeah. Talk about somebody that was an athlete too. He was like a gymnast or something, man. He was just so smooth, but it was almost like an unreal kind of smooth. It was just crazy how
He was very limber, so he could do flips and everything, and come out just shocking you how he was on his feet after a fall like that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
How about the Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin?
Ronnie's a great guy. We traveled a lot together, and we've actually connected after all of us had retired. Every once in a while we'd connect.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen him for several years, and I was even thinking about trying to get in touch with him. But I think he was one of the best money draws in the wrestling business.
Yeah. Yeah, he was great.
And great to talk to. Road trips were fun. He was a lot of fun.
That's cool. All right. The next one on the list is my buddy and one of the shooters, one of the true shooters, and especially from that promotion, ICW, he was definitely, he can handle himself in the ring and out, is Mr. George Weingroff.
I knew you was going to say that. Oh, George, we traveled a lot together. The times you got to spend on the road, you got to really know him. And he's just a great guy. And he would watch the matches through his little monocle that he had. Mm-hmm. And he would coach you. He would tell you, what looked good and what looked bad and all that.
Yeah.
But just, just a natural of the business.
Oh, yeah. Let me play you something really quick. So we had George on the podcast. Wolfie D and I from PG-13, we have a podcast called Live and in Color. All the listeners already know this, but I'm going to play you this recording. After we had George Weingroff on the show, this is what he called me and said here.
Hi, Jimmy. George Weingroff. I see Wolfie had left me a message about doing a show on Tuesday, and that'd be fine with me. I was wondering if I talked to Ronnie Garvin, and he'd be willing to come on there with me. So I want to know if that would work for you. You guys would like that. All right. Let me know.
So that's George Weingroff, and he offered up Ronnie Garvin. So he asked, would it be okay for him to have Ronnie Garvin on with us? And I couldn't answer him yes quick enough, you know? So, right. Yeah, George was great, and George is a friend. And I tell you what, man, he was one of those guys that I couldn't believe that he went and wrestled Pancrase, the more shoot style wrestling in Japan at 41 too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So. Pretty crazy stuff, if in my book, you know. So
yeah, I learned a lot from him. He would watch all the matches, and he'd critique you, and always in a good way, and yeah, great guy.
Yeah, great guy. Well, okay, so you kind of end up wrapping up with the Poffos, and you go to this promotion with what would be your home essentially for the next year. You end up in CWA in Memphis. So I guess we kind of know how you got from the Gulases to the Poffos. How did you make it from the Poffos to Memphis?
Well, when I came back home, then when I started making some phone calls, and I don't remember exactly who I talked to, but like when I got into Mid-Atlantic, I talked to Jay Youngblood, and he talked to Dory, and he introduced us.
Oh, okay.
But out there, they had already seen my work from Nick Gulas and from Poffo's, some of the shows that they did. And so, when I was available, and I think they just needed some underneath talent, that they said, come on in, and so I had a good run there. It's a gimmick territory,
right?
And so that makes you start realizing that there's different characters to the whole promotion, not just different wrestlers.
Yeah,
and so that was a whole new experience for me, and.
Yeah.
Long trips, that's the only thing, but it was, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't have traded for nothing. And it became my go-to promotion after I would go somewhere else for a few months or 6 months. And then I knew that I could call them and say, I'm finished down here. I went to Pensacola. And when I finished up there, I called, and they said, well, come on back. We got a spot.
Yeah, come on back anytime. Yeah. And, that's funny because you did go from a very, I would say, ICW was very, what would you call it? The promotion, they were very hungry, it seemed. Like they were they were very hungry to run and show that they were the real deal. And then you get to CWA where it's a little more, what's the word? They're already set. They're not trying to build the company. They've got the company. So it probably went from a very work hard and press to another company where you work hard and press, but it's a different vibe out there. And I've heard Dirty White Boy say this. He's like, I went from the Fullers and Continental I went to CWA in Memphis, where USWA Memphis, buddy, that's howdy doody time out there, And you must understand what that means because you laughed. But anyway, they had the characters, and they had their way of telling stories. And honestly, Memphis is one of my current favorites of all time because I'm a Mid-Atlantic kid. We grew up in the Mid-Atlantic area, but I've become an adoptee of Memphis, So anyway, Jared, start us off with the first name in that.
All right. Talk to us about Tojo.
Oh, Tojo. He was a character.
Yeah.
And, he was, I would say probably a moody kind of person. You didn't ever know how he was going to be. To react, and sometimes he would, you could make him smile, and sometimes there was no way you're gonna make him smile. But you just try to work a good match with him, and then he's okay with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've heard some great stories about Tojo before. That's awesome. So the next one on our list is the original Midnight Express with Dennis Condrey, Norvell Austin, and Randy Rose. Talk about them.
They were great to work with. It was Bobby Eaton more with the Midnight Express when I was more involved with them.
But, right, exactly.
I did get to work with them. And as a matter of fact, I think Louisiana for Watts, they were down there at the same time I was.
Yeah.
So I had opportunities for different promoters to work with the same people, and different promoters have different expectations.
Yeah, of course. So it's a different match, even though it's the same guy. It's a different match. I love that.
Yeah,
that to me is the absolute art of the business. To me, is just how cool you can see one. You see the right. Let's just give you an example of the Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express in Mid-South, or if you see them in Crockett, or if you see them anywhere else. It's just, to me, it's just so. I love that, and that's what I consider, like I said, the art of the business.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This guy's got a reputation for hard hitting. Gypsy Joe.
Oh, you're right. He was a tough one to work with. He was solid, and he could put you in your place too, especially a green rookie.
Yeah.
But overall, it was, I survived the matches, so I felt like I did pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. That's always a plus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this next guy, he's considered one of the best workers and one of the best baby faces of all time, Ricky Morton.
He is. I would agree with that. He can fly around, and his psychology is there. He had a good advantage because his dad, Paul Morton, was a referee.
Yeah.
And so he grew up with the business.
Right.
And so it made him just be a natural.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Is he the best seller of all time, Rick?
I would say, if not, very close to it.
Okay. Who's better, if you think, if there's one up there with him, who was really good?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that.
Okay. Well, maybe if it comes up.
There's some names at me.
What about Ricky Steamboat? He was great, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we'll get to Ricky in a minute. Let's keep going with some Memphis here. So the next one, and I'm going to say these two names together because I may be hoping it will evoke a story. And this one is Coco Beware and Steve Kern. Were you there the night that they got into it?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I knew both of them well, but I don't remember that.
Gotcha. Well, there's a story that Coco kind of gave him the business a little bit and worked him over pretty good. But I love Steve Kern. I think Steve's one of my favorite people. I got to meet him and do an interview with him. And we've done an interview with Coco Beware as well. And both are great guys. But I have heard that Coco was not one you wanted to mess with. Let's just say that. So.
Well, I never had any problems with him. I mean, I saw him at a convention not long ago.
Yeah.
And, so he was always a great guy to me.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and Steve Kern, he was one I looked up to, especially when I got a chance to work in Tampa.
Yeah.
And he was there. So, I'm still a fan, no matter, even through all that, I was still a fan of different ones.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. Well, the next name on the list, I'm going to go ahead and say it since, we brought up one of the fabulous ones. Let's bring up the other one, Stan Lane.
Stan was a super nice guy, and I enjoyed talking to him in the dressing room. I never worked with him, but, we traveled together. A lot of the road trips, that's where you really get to your connection of knowing each other.
Yeah.
And, but great guy.
Great guy. Very cool.
All right. How about Eric Embry?
Eric, same with him. He's a good old Tennessee boy, and always, he when you hadn't seen him in years, he walks up, he grabs you, hugs you, and it's like you've never been apart. Just a good guy.
Yeah,
good worker.
Yeah, open the book at a new page, right? It's no time has passed, right? So the next one, I'm gonna do a little impersonation. My name was Kamala. Tell me about working with Kamala.
I had his debut match in Memphis at the Mid-South Coliseum.
Yes,
and it was light as a feather. I mean, he looked like he was knocking the what out of you, and but he was a great guy. And it was an honor to have his debut match.
Yeah, because they did that incredible lead in, and I mean, it was just awesome how they did stuff with him. Yeah, and what a original character too. Funny guy, I've heard too, and he could actually sing really well too, just like Coco. So
I didn't hear him sing, but he was a comic.
Well, if you ever go on YouTube, just look up him singing. You'll hear it if you ever need to. Well, so 1982, you kind of end up wrapping up the first time with Memphis, and you actually work one show for Mid-South, and then that leads you directly back home, basically, for you to the Mid-Atlantic for the Crockett's. So to me, you go down to Mid-South. Was that literally just a one-time thing, no promises for anything more, and then you got Mid-Atlantic? Do you remember how that happened?
Well, when I went to Mid-South, one of the times I went there twice. I'm trying to remember exactly. But I went in and I was there for 3 months, and I was loving it, loving the territory. The money that I was making was great. And I asked Bill Watts, I said, I know you change your underneath talent every 3 months, but is there any way that I could get a 3-month extension? He says, nah. He says, you can come back sometime. He said, but I stick to that.
That's the stick.
And, but he was great to work for. And I had a great time there. I got to wrestle in the Superdome, and that's a major honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get back to him. I want to talk about the Mid-Atlantic now. So, all right. So obviously you've worked, you're becoming a veteran now. The green has changed color. You're actually starting to understand the business a little more now, and you're working for your home territory. And I would assume that's probably your favorite promotion, since it was growing up. Would that be true?
Well, it would be, the top two would be Mid-Atlantic and Central States.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll get to Central States in a minute, but let's talk Mid-Atlantic. I can't wait to hear about Mid-Atlantic. So.
Okay. When I went to Watts, before I came back home, my stepfather was sick with cancer, so I come back home to help out a little bit. And I was going to the matches, and I bumped into Jay Youngblood. And, so we kind of got a connection going there. And so he was the one that talked to Dory about me starting there.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's how I got into Mid-Atlantic.
Very cool. So how were the Crockett's? We always like to ask this question because obviously we love Mid-Atlantic. How were they working for them?
It was awesome. Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And, and then, I was the most thrilled person you'd ever imagine, because I was working for my dream territory, and I got to wrestle in my home civic center and things like that. I was wrestling with the people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And, couldn't have been any better.
Salem Civic Center. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wild to think about. You come home and you work in the home civic center. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, Lebanon didn't have a civic center, but when it comes down to it, getting to work in your hometown, I would assume a lot of your people came out to see you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Family and friends.
Hey, this Ric McCord guy's getting over, guys. We got to put him up the card a little bit. Listen to that. I'm sure they heard the story, though. So one of the first matches you worked there was with one of my favorite guys, and especially, I'm not sure if his manager was with him at this time. I know that this was kind of a big combo, but was the Great Kabuki and was Gary Hart with him at this point?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was very interesting, but it was a great match. I loved it, and it was different.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So do you have anything you could say about Gary at all? Did you know him at all very well?
Well, being in the other dressing room, I didn't get to really know him, but you know, just in the passing and you know, but he was good to work with, you know, him being a manager and everything, and you know, so it was good.
That was my guy. The listeners are tired of hearing this, but when I got in the business, that was the guy I ripped off the most, probably. So it was just funny because when he would say stuff like, "Let me tell you something, baby," you know, I couldn't really get that across in the 2000s as well as it sounded in the 80s, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
he had the rap that.
He did.
So many that got later.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah.
All right. How about Dory Funk Jr.?
Dory was the booker when Jay introduced me and, you know, helped me get started with Mid-Atlantic. So I got to work with Dory several times, and great to work with, you know. You got to imagine here you're wrestling someone that was a world champion that, you know, you're just there and you're just ready to listen to whatever they got to say and you know, just try to do the best you can with a great person.
Yeah, I got to meet Dory later on a Mike Porter show, and wow, just he was still working then, and just such a great guy. And so he had everybody listening to him. You know, it was like funny because most people are usually talking in the locker room, but everybody was hunkered around Dory. And you know, the cool thing was they had him set up in a different room there at the building, but he actually was in there with us, talking to us. It was incredible. Okay. So Dory was a great guy for sure. I was lucky to be on that show. So the next one on the list, and he became much more famous later when he worked with Vince and he had a reptile wrapped around him. But at this point, he's getting pretty good at this game of wrestling here, Mr. Jake the Snake Roberts.
The Snake. Yes. When I talk about him, I tell people that I wrestled him at the right era. It was before Damien.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know if I could have laid there and had a snake laid on me.
No, I don't think I could either, you know, but hey, who knows? Maybe if you're in the moment, you could do it, but I don't know. I'm glad you said that too, Rick, because I don't think I could.
All right. How about Gene Anderson?
I watched Gene growing up, and I worked with him a few times. And he was, you know, he was solid, you know, and we had good matches. All I had to do was listen. Yeah. I learned that early on, so you know, and it helped a lot because I'm learning. So, you know, I didn't try to be arrogant or aggressive with myself. You know, I was taking it all in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How about the one-man gang?
Hands of Stone. I've talked to Ronnie ever so often, and, you know, we were together in Tennessee and a little bit, and then in Knoxville. And then when Poffo's had ICW, he come up there. So we've kept in touch through the years, and he's become a great friend.
Yeah. Now, this is cool because, you know, there wasn't Crusher Broomfield took over the one-man gang name, but at this point, the one-man gang was Ronnie Garvin, and that's why I wanted him to come up, you know, because so many people think of Crusher Broomfield as the one-man gang. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was cool. I'm glad you...
I wrestled Crusher on his debut match in ICW, too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So he was a good guy.
How was he as a big guy, like wrestling?
Yeah. You just have to develop, you know, you stay away from him, play cat and mouse. You know, that's kind of where the matches are. And then once he got you, he's going to eat you alive. So.
All right. How about the next one here, Greg Valentine?
I worked with him a few times in Mid-Atlantic with Crockett. And when I'd pass him in the dressing room or whatever, he's always a nice guy. And but he was solid. And very solid, but in a good way too.
Yeah, I mean, he had it in his blood, I guess, from his dad and everything. So
yeah.
How about Johnny Weaver?
Johnny Weaver, before we got into the actual business, he would talk to me in the Calypso and you know, give us some pointers and everything. And he was getting away from Mid-Atlantic and becoming retired and everything. I think he did a few shows for Calypso, but I had already started my pursuit where I was headed.
Yeah.
But Johnny's a great guy.
The Weaver Lock.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was the sleeper hold. I always thought it was called the Weaver Lock.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
What about one of the greatest brother tag teams of all time? And I don't mean the Andersons. I'm talking about the Briscoes.
I got to work with them on TV, and I saw Jerry and Waterloo back in the summer.
Yeah,
I go out there every year for the convention.
Yeah,
and Jerry had an issue. They had to take him to the hospital, but he was okay the next day and come back to the convention. Got to wrestle with Jack and Jerry in a match on TV one time, and it was a great honor.
That's awesome.
For Crockett.
Yeah, I've heard that Jack Briscoe had that tensile strength in his hand where he could really put a hurting on you. He was really strong and very unsuspectingly strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never had to feel that, but you could just tell. And
yeah, well, that's good.
Definitely a shooter.
Yeah, definitely a shooter. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard people say that, if he needed you somewhere and you weren't there, he could move you there and make it look natural. Let's just say that.
Right.
But apparently you're at this point now, you're not needing that, thankfully.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, the next is another great tag team, and you brought them up, and we can just go quickly with this one if you want, but we can talk as much as you like. But I personally think if this tag team could have stayed together, had it not been for other circumstances, they would be probably considered one of the greatest tag teams of all time, and that's Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And see, Jay was the one that I had become friends with, down by the dressing room door. Even though I'd been in the business elsewhere, I didn't go backstage.
Yeah.
And so Jay was instrumental in getting me connected to Dory. And Dory was booking then. So that's how I got into Mid-Atlantic. And they were just an awesome team. I mean, I wish I could have moved as high and as fast as Ricky did.
Yeah.
Had one of the best arm drags of anybody.
And a drop kick. And it's funny. It's just so funny. I almost think the one person that I think was almost comparable to Ricky was Brad Armstrong. What did you think? He would be a close second. Brad was lightweight, so he had that ability, and he still looked good. He didn't look like non-muscled or whatever, and that makes a difference. Oh, it does. It does. Yeah. He looked like $1 million, but Ricky did too. Ricky I've heard that the women loved these two guys. You could just, it was they did not have any trouble with the ladies. Let's just say that. So no.
All right. How about Dick Slater?
I worked with Dick a couple of times. He was always kind of quiet in the dressing room. He was in his clique most of the time.
Gotcha.
So we didn't get to talk a whole lot. I worked with him a couple of times.
That's right. It's the Talk of Middle Tennessee, the channel you love to hate and the channel you hate to love. It's Brian Turner from Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. And if you're looking for matches from Wolfie D to Jerry Lawler to Dusty Rhodes and the team that put a pimp before your eyes and a goatee between your thighs, Booty Call and Athena, go to lostwrestling.com. See, I made it easy for you. Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. Booyah.
Hey, it's the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze, and I'm inviting all of y'all to join me on my brand new podcast, Turning Up the Heat with the Heat Miser Scotty Blaze. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and join me. I'll be covering all the events of the day, global, national, pop culture, movies, gaming, whatever sounds interesting. But I'll also be playing some awesome skating shuffle music From the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, anything that has a good beat, I'm going to be playing it. You can rest assured. Come on over, TUTHradio.com. The podcast is on every major podcast platform. See you then.
The next one, shares your first name, possibly the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, definitely has the most runs, 16, 17, 21, however many you want to count. He's my personal favorite. Yeah, more to come. You think? Maybe. He's not over yet, right? Exactly. That's so funny. But the one and only Nature Boy Ric Flair.
Well, I never got to work with him, but it was one time it was so close, and it was at the Greensboro Coliseum.
Yeah.
No, it was on TV, Charlotte TV. And I'm going to get this right in a minute. It was Memphis TV.
Okay.
And I was scheduled to wrestle him on TV. And Jerry Lawler come out and started mouthing off at him. And so they were back and forth. And Jerry says, Ric McCord, you probably just ought to go ahead and go back to the dressing room. I'm going to take your spot.
Oh, man.
So I was that close to working with Rick.
Oh, man. That's crazy. Yeah.
And I always dreamed of doing it, but that I was in the show with him, so that was good enough.
Yeah, that was important for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, was he just from your perspective, being the wrestler that you are and were, was he all that? I mean, he was the real deal, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In and out of the ring, he could. His charisma followed him to his car at the end of the night at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And then he was still on stage.
Yeah. And he was one of those first heels that was actually starting to get fans of him. I know there's been others before that, but he seemed to be one of the first ones, because just for example, we had older cousins growing up that loved Ric Flair. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It seemed like the teenage guys started to really get into Ric Flair and become fans of him, even though he was doing everything he could be to be a heel, so. Well,
he was a great entertainer in every aspect of the business.
Yeah.
From interviews to just his presence.
Yeah.
He commanded the presence wherever he walked.
Well, let me ask you this then. So a lot of guys, it seems here recently, some of the guys like to take him as a routine guy. They basically say that he wrestles the same match every night. Now, I've heard him tell the story. The reason he does that is because he was younger and loved Ray Stevens, and he went to a Ray Stevens match, and Ray didn't do the flip over the top rope and outside to the ring. And he asked Ray later on, why didn't you do that? And Ray said, well, kid, I don't do the same thing every night. Well, Rick thought to himself and said, well, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep my things going. What were your thoughts on the way he wrestled as far as doing a lot of the same spots?
Well, me studying the business, I could look at it a little bit different, to understand it. And, there was enough, there was his opponent that made the differences. And he could do the same thing, and everybody's going to scream and holler anyway.
Yeah.
Just because it's Ric Flair.
Yeah.
But, I wish I'd had the chance to really work with him, just to know, physically.
Yeah.
That, because everybody that worked with him loved it.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And it's you're out there to put a show on, and you don't want to do. I'd see some guys do the same thing over and over, and you could call their next move.
Right.
Well, you could call the next part of Rick's moves,
right?
Possibly because you knew where he was going, but he would still have so much more of the match that had differences.
Gotcha. Okay. That's good. I like that. That's the best. That's the best way I've ever heard it said. I definitely appreciate that. Yeah.
How about the Assassins?
I got to work with them. That was in Carolina, and Jody. I'd see him without the mask, and we talked back in the dressing room, and he was kind of a natural coach. but nice guy too. Trying to remember.
Was it Tom? Was it Tom Renesto as the other assassin?
Yeah, I worked for Tom Renesto when he was the booker for Nick Gulas.
Okay, gotcha. So you knew him.
So I didn't. Yeah, but I'm trying to remember who was the other assassin that came in at that time.
Gotcha. Okay.
Ray, he was a bodybuilder.
Oh, Ray Hernandez.
Ray Hernandez. Yeah. That's it.
Hercules. Yeah.
Hercules. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we worked matches. I worked a couple of tags with that. Don Cronodal's brother, Keith Larson.
Yeah.
He and I were the main tag team in Mid-Atlantic.
That's awesome.
So we got to work with a lot of the big top heels.
Yeah, and they were the real deal too. We got to see Jody wrestle on a spot show in the 80s in Council, Virginia as the assassin, and he was great then. Even though he was a little older, he could still rule the crowd. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I would always watch him. He would, when you get the 1, 2, 3 count, he would kind of flip his hand in such a way like done.
Yeah, it's done.
After a match.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the next name on the list, it can't be not said because this guy he's practically a neighbor of you. And he's also one of the most legendary names, not only for Memphis, but also the Mid-Atlantic. And whether you want to call him handsome or a boogie woogie man, it's Jimmy Valiant.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not far from me. It's
Shawsville, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And a matter of fact, I picked him up and took him out to Nashville for Ric Flair's retirement match.
How was that?
Well, I didn't get to see the match because Jimmy wanted to go, and I watched just a little bit of the start of it. Yeah. And I knew when it was time for me to hang up the tights. And, Flair has got the mic skills still, but right. I don't think he quite had the physical part. And that's totally understandable.
Of course.
I couldn't get in the ring and do what I used to do now either.
Right.
But it was a great show. I got to see Jerry Jarrett before he passed. And, he was a promoter I worked for when I was working when Lawler was there out of Memphis. So, it was a great little convention they had.
I would love to hear. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Because Conrad and them, to know that they run that and did that, it was a massive event just based around the idea of Ric Flair in his last match. And we still don't really know if that was truly his last match or not,
Everybody says that, including me.
So I'm just going to be nosy and obviously omit what you want to. But I would love to hear what a car ride with Jimmy Valiant is like.
Oh, well, it was always entertaining, and talk about the business, of course.
Yeah,
and he snoozed a little bit, but it was a great trip. We just talked about different territories and things we encountered and got to do and all that.
Yeah.
But great guy. I love him to death. He's one of a kind.
Yeah, definitely one of a kind. There's nobody like him, brother. Yeah.
How about Roddy Piper?
Roddy, when I was working for Crockett, he, sometimes when you was just the underneath talent, the main eventers stuck together, and he would come in and he'd see me, and he'd come over and sit down beside me and start talking to me, and I felt honored.
Yeah.
And it was great to be able to speak to him personally. And then, that was somebody else. I got a limo service now that I've been doing for 26 years, and I drive Vince whenever he would come to town. And
wow,
I drove Michael Hayes.
Yeah.
And just different ones like that. So I got to relive. Every once in a while, I get to relive it whenever they call us to pick up somebody.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just like I picked up Ricky about a month ago. He was going to do a podcast, I think.
Oh, okay.
And he was going down for a match in Charlotte. He was a special guest referee.
Gotcha.
And they came back to Roanoke that night. So
Gotcha. That's very cool. Well, next time he gets in you drive him to where I am so we can do a podcast with him too. I'm kidding. He would be like, what are you dropping me off at a house for? I was paid a lot of money, Ricky. I know it's weird, but trust me. Anyway, to me, Roddy was timeless. You know what I mean? He's definitely, he's on my Mount Rushmore of pro wrestlers. To me, Roddy was such an original, and I think that's one thing that may be missing from the current crop of wrestlers is all these guys that we've brought up. And I'm not trying to say the good old days. I mean, the name of the podcast is Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling. I think you understand that because that can mean something different to everyone. But the idea of originality is part of that. And I think you talk about all these guys that we've brought up, and they're all originals. And, that's one thing that I hope someone is able to teach to the current crop is be original, be real, be original. And I think originality is something that Roddy Piper really strive on. I mean, he really was a true original. When he protected Gordon Soley, that was incredible. When he did amateur wrestling with Ric Flair in the ring, that was incredible on Mid-Atlantic. I just think of his run in Mid-Atlantic. And folks, if you haven't watched that, I know you understand he was the bad guy for WWF for decades, but go watch him in Mid-Atlantic and you will not be let down. That was incredible stuff, Yeah.
So. Well, one of the things I was honored about, and even in Central States, he come out for a shot, but he come over and sat down beside me on the bench in the locker room, and just started carrying on a conversation. He was just a genuine person.
That's the truth right there, I think. And I had a chance to meet him. It didn't end up happening. I was let down by that, but it's not anybody else's fault but mine. And just a true, original, genuine person. So the next tag team, talking about originals, this tag team, these guys, at this point in time, probably, let's just say we're pretty stiff, I would imagine, because they were probably very green at this point. But Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors.
Ooh. They were tough.
Yeah.
You did what they wanted. You didn't do what your idea was. They put you in place real quick.
Yeah.
But out of the ring, they were nice. They didn't, we didn't sit around and have any conversations or anything. But
sure,
it was an experience to get to work with them, and I survived. So that was the main thing.
Yeah, you're still here to talk about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This guy is truly one of the all-time greats, and unfortunately, just not enough people, current fans, I think, probably really remember him. But Ivan Koloff.
Ivan was, I worked with him in the Carolinas, and he was great to work with. And, we'd sit and backstage and chat every now and then. Kirk Harrell, who was, Boris Zukov.
Yeah, Boris Zukov. That's it. Yeah.
I can't say that he's here in Roanoke. I haven't talked to anybody that's actually heard him say.
Yeah, that's where he is. Yeah, that's where he is.
Yeah. Okay. He looks a lot different too.
He does, man. He lost a lot. His head's still the same size, but I'm just picking on you, Boris. But I just interviewed Boris on the Wolfie D podcast, actually. So I'm getting a good Virginia base right now. I've got 2 shows with 2 Virginia guys. I love it. So
okay.
Boris did a lot of Ivan's. I think that was his gimmick, like kind of not that he ripped Ivan off, but when he did his thing like this, brother, he talked like he did more Ivan and not, and that's awesome.
He did the gimmick well.
Yeah, he did.
He adapted it very well.
Yeah.
And but that was some of the guys like Ivan and Johnny Weaver and different ones that I watched growing up.
Yeah.
That was such an honor to be backstage with them and could walk up to them and carry on a conversation, and not, they didn't, like a fan, they'll sign the autograph and chat a second and then go.
Yeah.
And, so it was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. Well, you wrap up 83 in Mid-Atlantic time, and then you actually start going out a little more, and you actually wind up in early part of 84 with Southeastern for the Fullers. So obviously you've made your name now. You're known as a good hand. What led you to the Fullers? What led you away from Mid-Atlantic and your home to go to the Fullers?
Well, I always wanted to go to Tampa. And then I met a couple of people, and a lot of times that's how it happens, is you meet somebody that you've crossed paths with, and they can speak for you to get you the introduction. Gotcha. And so that's, I think it was in Tennessee at that point, and with Lawler, and so then I went down to Pensacola and had a good little run. And it was like one of the territories that you'd run 3 to 6 months, and if you made main event, you'd stay. If you didn't, you'd gain more experience and go to the next territory.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring some names up here, and we're going to just do these kind of quickly here. But obviously, you work guys like Bill Eadie as the superstar there, and you talked about Boris, Kirk, Private Jim Nelson, whatever you want to call. I learned that he took his last name from Art Nelson. I never knew that, but that was cool. Yeah, and then of course, Wayne Ferris, aka the Honky Tonk Man, or Blonde Bomber, or whatever you want to call him. But you worked some great names there that wound up doing some great things, in that territory. Talk about maybe some of your experiences with some of those guys. I know we talked about Boris a little bit, but maybe Bill Eadie or Wayne. I only worked with him a couple of times, but if you're in connecting dressing rooms or a single dressing room, you get a chance to learn and know somebody a little more from just in the ring. And so that's where it happened with some of those. With Bill Eadie, when I go to a reunion, he always comes over and says hi if I don't get to him first. So very respectful guy. So I like him. Everybody I've ever met that knows Bill Eadie says he is just a great man. So, Now, okay, so at the very, you kind of wrap up in Southeastern, like you said, you did your 3 or 6 months there, but then you end up coming back to your second home in Memphis. At this time, you've worked, you've worked in Gulas territory, you've worked for ICW for the Poffos, you worked in Memphis. You worked in, like you said, a little bit in Mid-South. You worked in Mid-Atlantic at your home. You worked in Southeastern for the Fullers. Now you come back to Memphis. So it's a little bit of what you would almost call like a full circle a little bit. How were the differences in the territories? What did you notice at that time? And you're like, okay, maybe I can come back to Memphis. I know these guys. Talk a little bit about that.
Memphis became the territory that I would go back to in between. Like I went to Arizona and I went to Texas. Texas, I stayed there for about a year. But Memphis was the territory you could come back to and keep working because they would say, come on back, we got a spot. I was already established, so I didn't have to prove myself. And, but then I would be talking, networking or something, and another opportunity would come up. And so then I'd go pursue it. And when that was over, I'd call back, and Bill Dundee was the booker at that time. And I said, hey, Bill, I'm free now. He says, come on in, kid.
Wow.
So it was pretty good like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about the Barbarian.
Super nice guy. I've seen him on a few reunions, and we get to talk some, and he was great to work with. I've got a picture that I showed somebody just a couple of days ago. He's pressing me overhead, and for a slam. And the look on my face, you can tell it's a long way down.
I've heard he just had ridiculous amount of strength too. He was just one of those. I think Kamala called it animal strength. He was just that strong, And to me, I love the Barbarian because Jared and I, we grew up Rock and Roll Express fans, but then obviously we also loved the Road Warriors. And then there were all these tag teams that kind of took off of a little bit of the Road Warriors. You had obviously Bill Eadie, Barry Dorso with Demolition, but with Barbarian, he kind of had that look too. You know, I know he did some stuff with T.J. Khan and other guys, but when he had the Powers of Pain with Warlord, and we'll get to him in a minute, but Barbarian to me just was, even though they did the Road Warrior thing, he still had his own originality about him. You know?
He did.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty nice guy too, and you're glad that he's a nice guy, I've heard. So,
yeah, that's true.
If he was not nice, it would be trouble. So, so the next name on the list, this guy is another true original, and another just Memphis guy that just was original all down to his core, was Brickhouse Brown.
Yeah, I think we made a couple of road trips together, and of course he was in my same dressing room, so you know, we got a chance to chit chat back and forth. But I have seen him at California Alley Club. He was at one of them not long ago, and it's been a little while. But anyway, we always had a good time, and I think we may have tagged a couple of times.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think we did.
Yeah. Okay. So the next guy, I want to say this. There was few guys that actually scared me as a kid, and scared me to see them, scared me to be even them on TV. And this guy right here was one of those guys that legitimately scared me. And honestly, I thought he was one of the great true originals of this business, like we say so much here about Ox Baker.
Yeah. He come in for Poffos.
Yeah.
And that's where I met him.
Okay.
And I didn't actually work with him. We did Battle Royals.
Okay, gotcha.
So
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the main thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. How about Jim Neidhart?
I worked with him in Tennessee.
Yeah.
He was a big, solid guy. I wouldn't go move him. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. We learn so much now as we're older, how many guys were sent to Memphis to get seasoning. It's crazy to think about, but you know, somebody like a Jim Neidhart or a Scott Steiner or all these names that would get sent to Memphis to work, to get their seasoning about them. And to me, I think that tells you a lot about what Memphis offered to the business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you learned how to work there instead of being the monster.
Right. Once you learn how to work, you can be the monster. But before that, being a monster is probably dangerous, I would assume. So, yeah. Well, the next guy I think is probably arguably one of the greatest minds in the business. He also left us early, unfortunately, had a heart attack and passed away. But we talk about this all the time, but I would love to know what he would be doing today had he lived. And that is Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert.
Well, his dad, Tommy, I worked with him several times.
Yeah.
And then I was on the cards with Eddie a lot of times. And he was a very nice guy. Everybody liked him. He was a great worker. I didn't ever work a match with him.
Yeah.
But he was great.
I think a lot of these names are coming from those battle royals that you worked with them and stuff. So I would imagine it's like you didn't really get a taste of what they were, because a battle royal doesn't really let you know them as a worker that well. But the next one we got to go. And I think Eddie took a lot from this guy. We've talked about him a little bit, but there's no Memphis without Jerry the King Lawler.
Absolutely. That's what Memphis is.
Yeah.
Next, Elvis and Jerry.
I mean, you had Sputnik Monroe, you had Jackie Fargo, but honestly, when it comes down to it, anybody that says Memphis wrestling, they think Jerry the King Lawler, obviously. You know?
Yeah. He was definitely over.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
You know, and I got a chance to be in there that you know, they were still growing, and it was, and I was trying to grow. So there were some great times, and I appreciated it, having a spot that I could call when my tour would end, and I could say I'm free.
Yeah.
And they just say, come on in.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Rick Rude?
And I had a couple of matches with him, and he was nice to talk to in the dressing room, but I don't know a lot about him, you know. But I thought he was a good worker.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the body guys that was a real deal body guy, but also seemed to think, he seemed to look like he didn't let his muscles get in the way of being able to work a little bit. You know what I mean? So I know a lot of the body guys were, they couldn't walk and chew bubble gum, but when it comes down to it,
And that's the ones you watch out for.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Well, you do work Memphis, obviously. And then at the very end of 84, you leave Memphis after your run there, and you actually end up down in Mid-South Louisiana with Bill Watts again. So I guess we've heard all these stories, but how was the travel in that territory versus the other territories you
very long road trips. Mm-hmm. There was probably the longest of any territory that I worked.
Yeah.
And I was there for the 3 months, and I made in 3 months what I would make in 10 or 12 months in some other places.
That's awesome.
So it was, that was a good feeling.
Yeah.
If I'd have got 3 more months there, I'd have doubled everything.
That's amazing. Yeah. So what was the best territory to travel in your opinion?
Well, Pensacola was always good. They were short trips. You was home every night.
Yeah.
That was one thing that Fuller's always liked about it. And, but the, I don't know, just all of them had a long trip here and there.
Sure.
Carolina did, even Florida. But, it's the time you spent on the road was still just, it was so awesome anyway. You didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah.
I've never dreaded a trip.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. Because the car trips are where you get to know guys too. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the way I like to do this podcast is just think of me and Jared. I'm driving, Jared's in the back seat, you're riding shotgun, and we're just bugging you with a bunch of questions right now. So.
Well, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. Good. Well, so the very first name for the Mid-South with Bill Watts name game is Barry Dorso.
Yeah. He was he Axe or Smash?
He was Smash. Yeah.
Smash. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He was a nice guy.
That's cool.
Very nice.
Now, this next name I'm going to bring up is someone we want on the podcast. And I know he does his own podcast with some fishing and stuff. And, I think you actually just saw him. And, maybe if you can put in a good word for us, we'll get him on the show too, is Mr. Pat Rose.
Okay. I hadn't seen him in a while, but I've seen him at conventions.
Yeah.
I definitely would do that if I get a chance to see him. I'll be going to the, I'm trying to think, I'm planning to go to Winston at the end of the month.
Oh, okay. WrestleCade.
WrestleCade, yeah. And then I know I'll go to Waterloo. So some of these places, you just run into them. You don't know they're coming.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like more than just a reunion.
Yeah.
It's friendships.
Well, I'm mostly ribbing you. Don't go out of your way, but we appreciate any kind word you have for anybody about us. I appreciate it. So.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jared?
And this guy, Jimmy mentioned earlier about people kind of frightening him, see the look of him when he was a kid and everything like that. This guy's definitely up there for me, the missing link.
Dewey Roberts. I knew him down in Mobile.
Okay.
Territory down there. I knew of him, but I worked with him there.
Yeah.
And, so he's, I can't say a lot because, sometimes the heels were
in the other locker room.
And even away from the business that was like that.
You got to keep it that way. Kayfabe is real, Yeah. Absolutely. And that understands, George Weingroff told a great story about him he lived in a nudist colony, apparently Missing Link did. And George and his wife at the time went to visit them. And apparently, it was pretty interesting to go have a dinner there. And of course, I think they wore clothes while they were there because they wanted to respect George's wife. But, when it comes down to it, that's pretty wild stuff. To live.
I hadn't heard that story.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy one now. Yeah. So what about our cousin from across the way? He just recently passed away, but he's got to be some kind of distant cousin because we share the last name in Adrian Street.
Adrian, he was in Pensacola where we actually got to meet, and I worked several matches with him, and you could tell he was a shooter because some of his moves could be not exactly stiff, but surprising.
Snug.
And, yeah. And, you know, he could get a quick little chop in on you before you realized it.
Yeah.
But well, you know, he was always nice to talk to, and I enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, to grow up in the coal mining territories of Wales, I think is where he's originally from, and then in England and work that territory. And then at the same time, he's also wearing that gimmick, you know what I mean? A very effeminate, flamboyant character. You got to be pretty tough in the South, especially, you know, so yeah.
And he was tough.
Yeah, double tough is what I've heard.
Yeah.
I just love that he's a street. I asked him about coming on the podcast, and he was very polite, but he also had a price that was not in the budget. Let's just say that. Anywhere near the budget, actually. So, but I got to respect that. He's a businessman. We respect that for sure. So,
yeah.
All right. How about Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express?
Jim, when he was the photographer for Nick Gulas, I would ride in the car with him and his mom and Christine Jarrett to one of the shows. And that was always interesting.
Yeah, I bet.
And Jimmy was full of himself there too. He was on stage.
Yeah, that's an interesting car ride. I don't think I've ever heard of it. So him and his mom, the Mama Cornette was real. Obviously, we knew that, but that's funny. And then you've got Miss Jarrett, and then of course yourself. That's a crew right there. I can't imagine that was interesting.
It kind of happened, you know, just you're talking to somebody, you need a ride, and they said, well, we've got open space, come on with us, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay, so again, we're still in 84, and you're actually working your butt off. I think you've worked in 4 territories as of now, and you actually end up getting down to Florida, and you're working for Eddie Graham. What got you down there?
I always wanted to go there, and I was just I got a chance to go in for a show, and part of it, you know, people speaking for you. Steamboat would always put in a good word for me, and Jay Youngblood for a couple of them would do. But I got the chance to see Michael Hayes was booking, and that was when I got down there, and they said they liked my work, and they'd like for me to, how would I like to come in and settle down? And I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And then it was a few weeks later that Eddie passed.
Yeah.
And Michael Hayes took over the book. And so he had his own friends that he had in mind. So it kind of knocked that out of the water.
Gotcha. Okay. So how was that? I mean, that was crazy. It's a legendary story.
Yeah.
But I mean, was Eddie just not in a good way at that time?
I don't know what I guessed, and hearing people talk, is he had done some, you know, betting on a game.
Oh.
And I don't know if this is true, so I'm not spreading a rumor, but it was something about something that was in the bet was going to be traumatic to give up.
Gotcha.
And that's what I heard, but I'd never heard the official story.
Yeah. That's pretty wild. Yeah.
You know, everybody talking tough, and I'll just put this up, and you put that up, and you know.
Right.
I think that's kind of where that story was.
Yeah, it's such a crazy time and such a legendary name in the business, as far as so many guys give him props for their career, you know. So yeah. But you know, and then you end up it's still 84, but at the very end, you actually end up working for Texas All-Star for Joe Blanchard, and you actually got to work probably what some people consider one of the greatest of all times, and he was very young and very early on in his career at this time, Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, that's where where I first met him.
Yeah,
and it was a great territory, and let's see, Buck Robley was the booker, and so then, you know, everything was going really great there. They put the junior title on me, and so it was really good. Then and I got to go across the border and wrestle in Mexico a couple of shots.
Oh wow, how was that?
That was good.
Yeah.
And they also sent me to Phoenix, was Mesa, Arizona, to do a couple of shots out there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, I got to travel with that. And then I even went up and worked for Von Erich's on a couple of shows.
Yeah.
It was good.
I've heard that San Antonio has some incredible food down there. Did you get a chance to eat some of the great food?
Yeah. Absolutely. Down on the river walk.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about going to World Class. You mentioned it there. Talk to us a little bit about going to World Class in '85.
I was working for Watts the first time I went over, and they sent me over for a few shots. And so that's how I got connected in there. And then a couple other times I went in. Then when I went in San Antonio, Buck sent me up there to do a couple of TV tapings. So I would go in and still just kind of keep in contact. And then, of course, I would see some of the brothers at different territories.
Yeah, yeah. They're making a movie about it. I told Cassidy Riley, a friend of the show, former guest Cassidy Riley, he's in that movie, The Iron Claw. And I said, are you playing Ric McCord? Because he's a blonde guy. And I thought maybe he was playing Ric McCord, but he's not playing a named guy. But anyway, we're going to have him on the show to talk about that in the future. But I'm excited to see that movie. I always thought that story of the Von Erichs would be an incredible movie,
It's very unique. And
it is.
To get to work for him, it was just, it makes you smile.
Had David passed at that point yet? I can't remember.
Not when I was first there.
Yeah.
What year did he pass?
84.
84. So actually, he had just passed. It looks like.
But,
yeah. So anyway, I'm sure that hurt them. But how was Fritz to deal with? Was he pretty?
I didn't see him too much, but he was, from what I did, he was a nice guy.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
And again, just the consistency of work that you've had, how would you compare the world-class Texas wrestling to other territories? What would you say would be some of the similarities to others?
Well, a little bit of it was kind of like ICW. It was a family.
Yeah,
but
okay.
They were so well established that they had all the extras, more so than the Poffos did, and the Poffos was building that.
Right.
As they went along, but World Class just had a reputation of its own of being great.
Yeah.
And I see what's his name, the referee. Mine's drawing a blank. James Beard.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see him at all the conventions.
Yeah.
And he took a liking to me, and he would coach me on certain things, and you ought to do this, and and I respect him for that too, because he's just a good guy.
Yeah.
So we've become good friends, and
that's awesome. The cool thing is, I think he gets to play himself in the movie, which is awesome to me.
I saw that.
Yeah. I'm happy for that. Well, so you brought this territory up early on when we asked you some of your favorite territories, because in 1986, you actually end up making it to Kansas City to work for Bob Geigel for Central States. Yeah. I guess talk about what led you from Texas to Kansas City. How did you make it there?
Well, I heard good things about it, and I had met Bob Geigel, and I think it was in Carolina at one time, and just different ones that was going that way, and I just wanted to go there, so I went in and I talked to him, and Bob says, "Yeah, come on in."
Yeah,
and of course Bob Brown became a figure that was unique to the territory, and. So you look back on it and have a lot of laughs and all that, but it was a great territory. The talent there was good. It was like more like a home knit family, and I had the experience at that time to be able to pursue the better matches and all that too.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
It just it was a great territory, and Geigel. that guy was such a good person.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You know, you always, he'd say, see you later, pal.
I remember seeing him on Crockett all the time as the head of the NWA, you know, and that was his job, right? He was the president of the NWA. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure of the title. Yeah. But I mean, you work guys there like the Batten Twins, Butch Reed, you know, Pork Chop Cash, the Warlord, as we talked about. I would love to hear something about some of those guys. How was it working a lot of those guys?
Well, the Batten Twins, Brad took a leave of absence, and so I started tagging up with Bart.
Oh, okay.
And then the thing was Ken Timms and Pork Chop Cash had the tag titles. Yeah. And so we went back and forth with the tag team championships. And you know, it was everything there was great. The home territory, the home Coliseum, Kansas City, it was a perfect wrestling venue. And you know, so when they packed it most of the time. Yeah. But it was a territory that you could go out. You know, your extensions went out in every direction. And a few long trips, but most of them, you know, you didn't have to stay over unless you wanted to. So, you know, but it was, I was there for 8 years, and I was, you know, it was an honor to have got the chances that I got there, and and that's actually where I got into the limousine business.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, you know, this is a good question actually to ask you right now. So when you're going through all these territories, either Memphis or Florida or Texas, where do you normally stay? Do you have like a home base whenever you're in a territory, or are you traveling all the way back to Salem and coming to the next territory? How does that work?
No, you try to find a place there to stay. Okay. And sometimes, you know, one of the guys may be already there and they've got an apartment. They got a home back somewhere else. And so they've got an apartment, and they'll let you come stay a little bit till you find where you want to go.
Oh, okay.
And get your own place. You know, we're like brothers out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, so when I left, I think the last place, it was in San Antonio. Then I think that's where I went to next. But when I got there, Geigel he took a liking to me, and you know, so the word that gets used is you get the homestead, meaning you're going to settle in the territory for, you know, the rest of the days or whatever.
Right.
And you know, so I had the best run there, and just, you know, the city was big enough that there was a lot of stuff to do, and the guys that was there, great workers. You know, it was just an awesome territory. It was like the Mid-Atlantic that I grew up watching.
Yeah. Well, so now I got to bring this guy up because this guy actually has a move named after him. He's one of those guys that you had to move, and he's legendary in the business. And honestly, you know, I've heard his name brought up so many times, especially from the younger guys, because, you know, they go over every move. They don't really walk and talk as much as they should. But Pat O'Connor, that's just a legendary name. And also he has a move named after him. So tell us a little bit about Pat.
I didn't really get to meet him. I did one time. I think it was something was in the Central States that he come in for. But then, of course, at that time, he was more into working for Vince.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So I didn't get much chance to, you know, get to really know him. But
right.
He was there for a few shots.
I think it showed he was partial owner or something to that effect at one time there. But so in 88, Central States actually changes their name to the World Wrestling Alliance. Was that to do something, I guess, maybe to make it less regional and more like big sounding, I guess?
I think it was part of it, and they were getting people in from all over the country, you know, and it's cable with, you know, TBS. You got to do that. You got to step your own game up, and so that's what they were doing.
Yeah, taking it away from more of a regional name to a larger sounding name. It makes sense for sure.
How about legendary wrestler Ray Stevens?
I only got to meet him. I never worked with him or had a chance to really sit and chat with him.
Yeah.
But he was interesting. Yeah.
He was that's a great way to say it. So, well, so in 88, obviously you've worked in Central States and the World Wrestling Alliance as it's named now, but then you end up working a tag team, Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka, called Bad Company. Now, to me, I think they were one of the great tag teams, and I think they're underrated as far as a tag team. Talk about those guys a little bit.
They were easy to work with, and we had some great matches. Brad Batten took a hiatus I was telling you about, and so Bart and I got the tag titles, so we worked some matches with them.
Yeah,
and but I knew them from the Carolinas too.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was a plus.
And so you're also doing your limousine business at this time as well.
It's 94.
Okay, gotcha.
The limousine company was in the same office building.
Oh, okay.
And you could tell Geigel was slowing down, and the wrestling business was changing. Vince was taking over territories and all that. And I was already 40, and I didn't think I had the youth to try to start, and I didn't want to go back to just being a job or anything.
Sure.
And so I talked to the guy that had the limo service, and he said sure. And so I started driving for him part-time when I was on a day off.
Yeah.
And then, as it progressed, I really enjoyed it. And then I decided that, I wanted to come back home. My mom was not getting any younger, and I wanted to help her out some.
Sure.
So I came back, and then it's about a year later, I had been planning on it or thinking about it. So I started putting into the works to start my own limo company.
Cool. Very cool.
So January of 98, I started it.
That's awesome.
It'll be 26 years in January.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
That's
awesome.
Well, let's dial it back just a few years before we get to finish up here. But as we go in 1990, you actually ended up going up to Vern's and working in AWA some. How did that happen?
Geigel sent me and DJ Peterson up there to do a couple of shows.
Gotcha. Okay. So it wasn't a long thing. It was just a couple spots. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. How was it working for Vern, and how did you feel about that territory as a whole?
Well, if I hadn't started getting to the older age and say older.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
I probably would have pursued it. I'd like to have gone to the Pacific Northwest. That's one place I didn't get to go.
Right.
But getting to work up there with a few shots, and I knew some of the people, so that was a plus.
Yeah.
And so it made it enjoyable. And but at that time you could see Vince trying to take over everything, and and so I had been doing a lot of thinking about that. I love cars and I love to drive, and so that was. I tell people I went from the domino stretch to the super stretch.
That's incredible. I love that.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, and so in 91, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but there was a house show in Kansas City WCW had, and it shows you worked Mike George. Was that actually your last match?
No, Crockett came out there for a little while.
Okay.
And that's where I got the tag with Wahoo.
Oh, okay.
And that was a thrill in of its own.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
And, so they were doing some spot shows out there, and of course working with Geigel, but you could kind of tell the industry was changing, and Geigel didn't have the youth to fight for it like in earlier years it would have.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say Bob's legacy is to the business?
Well, I remember that he was a shooter, and he could put you in your place, but one of the nicest people you could ever meet.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me that you kind of see the end coming, maybe for your career, but also for the territories, because if there's anybody on any show ever, podcast, any time in wrestling, you are what I would consider a tried and true territory guy. Yeah. You literally touched, I mean, other than the Pacific Northwest or maybe in San Francisco or wherever, LA or whatever, other than that, you basically hit them all. And, you know, how was it to know that you literally were a territory guy? And that, I say that with a complete respect and honor, you know, knowing that how much the territories meant to pro wrestling. How was it to watch them end? How was it to watch the end of it happen?
It was kind of a shame, you know, if it would have been planned to, you know, have the big shows, you know, like the Super Bowl.
Right,
where everybody could get along, but you know, there was battles in the offices just as much as in the ring sometimes.
Right.
You know, of different territories and people. You know, there would be somebody that would try to start up and go in and steal a territory or steal a town.
Yeah.
And you know, if you'd have worked as a partnership, you know, you'd share the money, but you know, it made a strong base for it.
Yeah. You know, I saw that, you know, I know Crockett and Vern and Fritz, they would get together and do these big shows. I know they would run these big super shows, but the sad part about it, if you look at the card, it's a Crockett match, it's a Vern match, it's a Fritz match. They never really seem to cross over on those cards to make those dream matches happen. Now, I know Rick and Kerry Von Erich wrestled and some other guys, but when it came down to it, it didn't seem like they took full advantage of the fact of like, hey, look, we've got a big name here and a big name here. Let's put Rick against this guy. Let's put, you know, the Road Warriors against these guys. Let's put all these tag teams and take advantage of these dream matchups. But again, what I've heard, and you could probably agree with this, I would assume, is that it just really wasn't something that they had their full heart into. It seemed like everybody was still kind of looking out for themselves. Is that true, you think?
Well, I would kind of say that a little bit of that might be, but it was like in what I learned in the beginning is Nick was a gimmick territory.
Yeah.
Poffos were newbie on the block.
Yeah.
Jarrett was established and didn't worry about the others coming along. And, you know, so they didn't have to change to become one. You know, I think if it was all to be done again, they'd probably do it different.
Yeah.
But, you know, of course, then Vince started moving out and coming into everybody's territory. And, you know, that was like the biggest fear, but they didn't put it together strong enough to block it or to ride with it or whatever would have been best.
Right. That makes sense. Well, Rick, you know, this has been incredible. I can't believe the time has flown by like it has. We thank you so much for coming on. You know, whenever we wrap up every show, we always pivot to Jared's last question. This is his second favorite. You've already answered the Mount Rushmore, but this is his second favorite. And again, we thank you so much. And Jared, go ahead.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rick, thank you for an amazing interview. And this question, I know it's going to be a tough one. It's a tough one for everybody, especially with somebody who's wrestled as many matches as you have. But if you can think of like one or two or three of your like just your favorite matches you ever had, where you just felt like everything went the way it was supposed to, just an amazing opponent, what would those matches be?
Well, there'd have to definitely be one in there with Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Out of all the matches I had with him, there was one that I think Ronnie Garvin didn't show up, transportation issues. And so whenever that would happen, they would put over the baby face so the fans left happy.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I went over Randy.
Oh, wow.
So,
hey, you got that going for you.
Yeah. But, you know, it's just, there were many places I got to see and all that. It just, the memories still float in my mind and, you know, just think about it all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wish you could stay young forever.
Yeah, me too. Well, hey, amen to that. I would fix a lot of stuff if I could, but either way, definitely could. So, you know, again, Rick, you are a true legend of the business and a true just honored to have you on our podcast and to tell your story.
Thank you very much.
I know we've covered a lot, but I feel like we've also scratched the surface too. So maybe we'll just get you back for a part 2 to go a little bit deeper with some other stuff. But truly,
that would be great.
We're just so thankful that you gave us the time, because the idea of our podcast, Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, you're the mascot of that. You know what I mean? You truly lived through the time of what I would consider the greatest period of pro wrestling of all time. And I don't think there's any question about that. I guess, where can they find you now? Like you said you were going to the WrestleCade event. Where can people find you? Where will people be seeing you coming up?
Well, I go to Waterloo, Iowa every year, and I go to Vegas every year for the Cauliflower Alley Club.
Okay.
Then sometimes I go to Charlotte, and I haven't made the connection with the new promoter. When Greg Price was doing it, I just knew that it was that I needed to make time to be there. Yeah. And it was, it flowed. But I haven't got that with the new guy that does the Starrcade or the one in Charlotte. Okay. But anyway, it's just I appreciate y'all taking the time to do this, and it brings back so many memories. You don't sit and think about in detail some of the stuff. Yeah. Oh, one person that I have to mention that was one of my greatest mentors was Rufus R. Jones.
Oh, Freight Train. You got to love it.
He rode in my car more than anybody in the Carolinas.
Thank you for bringing that up.
He was my co-pilot.
Yeah.
And I have all the respect in the world for him. He was, and he would coach me, but he was just a good friend.
That's awesome. Yeah. Rick, next time you're in Charlotte, buddy, dinner's on me, okay? You come down. Okay. We'll take good care of you. But all right. I just, once again, thank you all so much for listening to this incredible interview with this incredible guy, Ric McCord. And Rick, you're the best. We just thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Rick.
Yeah, I like to come to Charlotte whenever my company gets a trip to go to the Charlotte airport.
Yeah.
So usually when I see that pop up, I say, I'll do that one.
CLT.
So I can just go back and reminisce.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, we're gonna end this here, and then coming up next, we're gonna wrap things up with the Plastic Sheik. But once again, Rick, thank you, brother. You're the best.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, Rick, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you too.
Take care.
It.
We'll talk soon.
You too.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
This is your rock star ring announcer, Aaron Camaro. I'm a man who believes the two greatest art forms ever created are professional wrestling and heavy rock music. So when I'm not hosting the best parties that also happen to be live professional wrestling shows, I'm hosting the Decibel Geek Podcast. Decibel Geek is a weekly podcast that features discussions of all things rock. We're talking the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Black Sabbath, Kiss, Ozzy, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Alice in Chains, Pantera, and everything in between. Plus, we'll turn you on to new bands from today that have the same spirit and style that the legends do. Decibel Geek is hosted by myself, along with Rockin' Pod founder Chris Sinzak, and each week you'll get interviews with famous musicians and industry insiders, along with informative, entertaining, humorous, and insightful discussions, and most importantly, a passion for the music. So if you love to rock out as much as I do, then this is your invitation to the greatest rock and roll party in all of podcasting. It's Decibel Geek, and it's available right now on all major podcast platforms. Oh yeah!
All Oh, Sheik, man, I tell you, that was a great interview, dude. Rick has just had an exceptional career. That's all I can say, you know.
Oh yeah, man. He's he definitely has been around the block with all the names that we grew up watching. Man, it's amazing.
A tried and true territory guy. You know, I was doing the research for the show and I looked at all of his stuff and I was like, man, he basically dipped once the territories were over with. Other than he did one WCW match in Kansas City and was like, I'm out. You know. Peace out. He started up that limousine business and took on a second career. It's funny because like Tommy Angel, you know, he dipped and then at 94 and then boom, he jumps into John Boy and Billy and radio and boom, Ric McCord did the exact same thing. It's like they saw when the time was to leave, when they were ready to go, and boom, it was that, and they made the choice. And it seems like both of them ended up very successful after that. So you really can't. You know, so it's like they got the best of the wrestling business, but then at the same time, they got out when the getting was good and, you know, heck, lived to tell about it, you know. But yeah, Rick, man, just, you know, I've heard his name so many times throughout the years, but from Kenny Steele talking about him, knowing him, to other guys knowing him, and then, you know, just end up, I sent Shane Morton, our official, you know, liaison to these guys. I said, Shane, do you have any contact for Ric McCord? And he sent me his number and I was like, yeah, I guess you do. So thank you, Shane. Definitely appreciate that one for hooking it up for us. Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks as always, Shane, man.
Yeah, and other than that, man, we just, you know, just definitely had fun with Rick. I feel like we could have kept going, but, you know, sometimes kind of want to watch the clock a little bit and not run the show too long. That way we're not, you know, talking till, you know, it's like, okay, what'd you eat yesterday? You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to do that. But anyway.
Yeah, you got to, I was thinking just now when you're talking about, you know, tried and true territory guy, like, you know, he went on and, you know, has been successful with the limousine business and everything that then, and, you know, Tommy Angel, we were talking about him, he'd been successful after, but just think there were probably some of these guys that weren't able to find success in other things in life after the territories shut down, and how unfortunate that is. I mean, but it kind of shows you what kind of go-getters those guys were. That's true. You know what I mean? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But we got some cool things coming up before the end of the year. I think there's going to be 2 more episodes before 2024, maybe 3. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. But anyway, got some good ideas, got some good people coming up. Definitely just stay tuned, as always, to @GMBMPW on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, on YouTube. Just keep us dialed in and you'll see who's upcoming and what to expect next. You know, we just want to thank you all so much for all the support you've given us, all the downloads you've listened to, all the YouTube views, all the anything you do. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all, as always, so much. I know we dropped this a day early, but tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so we obviously want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you eat to your fill and maybe some more, and hope it was all good, man, for sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself, so.
Me too. Line up a plate for me, so yeah. But other than that, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, man, I think at this time it's good.
Oh, man, I was hoping you were surprising me with another wrestling ticket, but anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, not yet.
Anyway, yeah. Well, again, thank you all so much. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great day. Go watch some wrestling. Listen to some podcasts. We thank you all. We'll see you later.
Don't forget. Like the gobbledygooker?
Yeah, exactly.
With a tear in my eye. This is the greatest moment in my life.
We'll see you later.
This has been a James Rock Street production.